I would like to acknowledge the Camaragal and Borragagal people of the Eora Nation. I would like to pay my respects to their elders past and present. It's so lovely to be with all of you this evening. My name is Kelly Mcdonald, and as many of you know, I'm new to the role of Assistant Gallery Director and Senior Curator here at Mossman Art Gallery. And I'm very much looking forward to meeting you all in person when the health orders allow. I would like to also welcome our Director, John Cheeseman, who is joining us via Zoom. This evening, we welcome guests from the Mossman Art Gallery Donor Circle, Viz Asia, the Asian Art Society of Australia, and the trustees of the Gordon Darling Foundation, who have generously supported the beautiful Upachara exhibition catalogue. There are over 100 of you joining us from as far afield as the ACT, South Australia, and Singapore. This evening, we are delighted to be joined by Dr. John Yu AC, a distinguished philanthropist, paediatrician, and cultural leader, as well as the exhibition curator, Dr. Siobhan Campbell, Senior Lecturer, School of Languages and Cultures at the University of Sydney. They will be giving us insights into the exhibition Upachara, Ceremonial Art from Southeast Asia, which is drawn from the collection of Dr. Yu and the late Dr. George Soutter AM. This exhibition follows on from 2014's Encounters with Bali, which featured a spectacular selection of Indonesian textiles. Upachara revisits these textiles, now part of the Mossman Art Gallery permanent collection, alongside a wider selection of ceremonial and functional objects from across Southeast Asia, which speak to Dr. Yu's interest in the ancient trade routes and connections of the region. Though Indonesia has been an important place for collecting, these objects spill over the boundaries of the modern Southeast Asian nation states we know today. The exhibition features basketry, textiles, ceramics, and objects in bronze, wood, terracotta, and silver. This exhibition at once highlights the interconnected nature of art traditions across the region and the unparalleled virtuosity and stylistic variety of functional, everyday, and ritual objects. I'm delighted to hand over to Dr. Siobhan Campbell.
Thank you, Kelly. Tonight, I'm very honoured to be talking to you about Upachara. However, before I begin discussing the specifics of the exhibition with the collector, Dr. John Yu, I do want to say a few words about the background to Upachara, as this is actually the second exhibition staged at Mossman Art Gallery to be curated from Dr. Yu's private collection of Southeast Asian art and antiquities. As Kelly mentioned, Upachara was conceived as a sister exhibition to follow the highly successful 2014 Encounters with Bali, also staged here at Mossman. Now, this focused on Indonesia's rich textile traditions, taking the island of Bali as a gateway from where John, as a collector, was initially fascinated by the beauty of the textiles themselves, and then over many years took pleasure in discovering the inventiveness and creativity of the women who wove them. Besides showcasing the incredible diversity of Indonesia's textiles, in that exhibition, we really wanted to highlight John's direct experience of the living nature of the cultures that produce these textiles. Or in other words, that John, while having a great appreciation for antiquity and the Indic-inspired cultures of Southeast Asia, has never privileged antiquity and opulence over his passion for accomplishment and creativity. A case in point are the Balinese shrine hangings, or lamak, which were a key feature of the earlier exhibition. And hopefully you'll be able to see an example here now with the stylized form of the female figure appliqued onto a base of red cotton cloth. And I'll return a little bit later when we look at the textiles selected for Upachara. Now, to our immense excitement, the exhibition Encounters with Bali was then developed for international tour to the Museum Textile in Jakarta in 2018. And it was a great privilege, not to mention incredibly daunting, to take these textiles back to their country of origin. And the incredible reception by the Indonesian audiences confirmed John Yu's collection to be one of the great private collections of Indonesian textiles outside of Indonesia. These images I'm showing you now are from the opening of the exhibition in Jakarta. And on that note, I would like to ask John to say a few words about the previous exhibition and particularly the experience of taking his collection to Indonesia.
Thanks, Siobhan. I think the exciting thing is that the show was mounted at the Textile Museum in Jakarta, the biggest textile museum in the whole of Indonesia. And I think for you to appreciate that what we showed there were textiles from Indonesia itself, but a collection put together by two Australian collectors based in Mosman and shown at the invitation of the Textile Museum, an exhibition supported by the Australian Embassy in Jakarta. I think it highlights the importance of art and culture in learning about our new neighbours and hopefully to understand more how they think and why they do things, but to know about the sort of factors, the sort of beliefs, the sort of traditions that determine the way they behave. And I like to think that Australia is an even better neighbour when we understand more about the Indonesians. I think that in the coming years, Indonesia is going to be more and more important to us. And as part of being a good neighbour to them, we owe it to them to learn about what they do, how they think, and how they live. But it was great fun taking it there, and we were all very, very proud. And I think it was great seeing the exhibition hung in Jakarta, because through seeing it in a different place, I learned to understand the importance of the curator's eye in choosing pieces, and that's Siobhan, and her expertise in the area and her ability with language made an enormous difference to the success of that exhibition. So thank you, Siobhan.
Thanks, John. So in the previous Encounters exhibition, we focused on the textiles. Now in Upachara, we're presenting a much broader range of works from across Southeast Asia, including basketry, textiles, ceramics, and objects in bronze, terracotta, wood, and silver from around the 10th century to the present. Broadly speaking, the treasures assembled in this collection have been dictated very much by John's changing tastes and interests as a collector. Beginning in the late 1970s, annual visits to Bali were an opportunity to acquire other objects from across the Indonesian archipelago. And attesting to the archipelago's role as a major centre of international trade, many of the early pieces that John acquired from sites in Indonesia drove his subsequent explorations of the art traditions of the Philippines, Thailand, Vietnam, Laos, and Myanmar. Now, unquestionably, John has the sense of dedication of a true collector who buys works of art with a genuine knowledge or interest in the subject, and frequently an emotional connection with the works he buys. John, I want to begin by talking about the baskets. This was unquestionably an aspect of your collection that we were both very keen to showcase, for the main reason that Southeast Asia is one of the most prolific areas for the production of basketry, but it does seem like the artistry as well as the function and meaning of baskets has not been given a great deal of attention in scholarly accounts or in museum settings. This is not to say that the exquisite design and exceptional quality has been overlooked, but in addition to looking at basketry and mat making as a fine art, there are often similarities in the designs of textiles and baskets. Though not all basket producing areas have strong textile traditions, the materials used are often common across the region. Bamboo, rattan, pandanus and lontar, but are also complemented by locally sourced materials, such as particular species of fern, used in the village of Tenganan in East Bali, that you can see in this example on the screen, as well as some of the Thai examples. The domestic use of basketry is virtually endless, while for ceremonial use, beetle boxes and bags are a common form. John, why are the baskets so special to you, and where do they all come from?
Well, Siobhan, as you said, baskets are something that is everywhere, but most of us actually don't see them. And the first time I went to Bali, it's the first time I saw rice growing in a paddy field. And I was lucky enough to the first paddy field I went to see them harvesting the rice. And whilst I was fascinated by that, what I saw were baskets. There were baskets everywhere. They were used in collecting the rice. They were used to hold the various tools used in the harvesting. They were used to hold the food for the workers. They were used as something important in ceremonies such as weddings. And I suddenly realized that we often see things that we like, but we dismiss them because we think they're just ordinary utilitarian objects. But some utilitarian objects are really very beautiful. And if you stop and look at them, you can see the exquisite workmanship, as well as the artistry of the basket maker. And I think this example from Bali is a really wonderful example of how beautiful and how well made and expertly made a basket can be. But this is one of my favorite baskets. An ordinary carrying basket from Lombok. The basketry tradition is pretty widespread throughout Ireland and mainland Southeast Asia, and it's not always easy to ascribe a particular area from which a basket might have come. But I don't think that matters, as long as you like it. And that's the nice thing about not being a public museum. I can buy what I like as long as I can afford it. It doesn't really matter. And as long as I know that it's correct and has a reasonable provenance and it hasn't been stolen.
Thank you, John. On that, I'd like to jump to the ceramics and begin with your interest in northern Thailand, and particularly the kiln sites that you have visited quite frequently over the past decade or so. I know this covered bowl from the Sukhothai kilns is one of your favorite pieces, as well as the celadon wares made by the Sawangkalop kilns. Could you say something about these?
Yeah, I started collecting ceramics 18th century English. Then I became interested in Chinese. But as most collectors will tell you, Chinese ceramics very rapidly got out of most of the budgets of the average collector. This one is from Thailand, Sukhothai. It's wonderful in that it's a metal shape. And it's the sort of shape you find not only in Asia, but in the Middle East. This one from Sukhothai has, I think, wonderful proportions. If you look at the knob, the lid, the bowl itself, it's exquisitely fashioned, and the form is really very satisfying. The drawing is with an iron pigment, a very stylized form, as you often find in Southeast Asian ceramics, but it's black-brown, and you don't find cobalt used in Thailand or in any part of Southeast Asia, excepting Vietnam. And if you see something that's said to be Thai and it's blue and white, cobalt, then it's not Thai. If you look at that carefully, you can probably see that the decoration is on a clay slip. And of course, Southeast Asia did not produce porcelain, and that the clay body often wasn't that smooth, beautiful, homogeneous material that you get in Chinese porcelain. Often the clay body, and you can see at the foot rim what it looks like, is really not very attractive, and it needs to be hidden with a slip in much the same way as you get in Delftware faience and all those other low-fired ceramics where the potter didn't have access to the wonderful clay and the centuries of techniques of purifying that clay that you get in Chinese porcelain. These ceramics, the man on the left, Swankalok, very near Sukhothai, about the same period, but it shows that a lot of the ceramics produced on a large commercial scale actually produced a lot of things on private commission. This almost certainly was private commission, presumably a monk with his fan. The other ceramics next to it, the top one is Swankalok again, once again with the Chinese shape this time. Below it is a flask and a bowl from arguably the most refined of ceramics of northern Thailand, Kalong. And Kalong comes from an area where there are a lot of hot springs and presumably at some stage volcanic activity. So their clay is different. And Kalong ceramics are probably the finest and the most carefully and well potted ceramics of northern Thailand. I can't see the others because
no. Let's move on to the Cambodian examples.
Yes, these are the two forms that are really interesting. They're Cambodian. Well, let's say they're from the Angkorian tradition, because whether they were potted in Cambodia or nearby Thailand, and there's just a river separating them, it's really hard to be sure. But the one on the left has this wonderful watery glaze that you tend to find in the ceramics in the hill areas on the western part of Cambodia. The one on the right is interesting because of its shape. This form is really quite common in Cambodia. And at first, I used to think it was uniquely Cambodian until I saw a lot of ceramics being excavated from southern China, from mainly Guangdong province, and there were all these other similar forms which predated the Angkorian period. So once again, just be a little bit careful in assuming the things that people tell you based on today's knowledge, because with the extraordinary amount of excavations taking place in China, we're learning more and more. And often they're telling us some of our earlier ideas weren't right.
Thanks, John. I'm just giving the audience a sense here of the range of ceramics displayed in the exhibition. But another part of your collection that I think really exemplifies your collecting ethos is the terracotta art from the medieval Javanese kingdom of Majapahit, centered in East Java between the 13th and 15th centuries. Now, often regarded as inferior to the sculptural art of bronze, stone, or gold, the use of terracotta was a defining feature of this very prosperous dynasty. Not only was it used to make the bricks for the construction of palace and temple complexes, but for ornamental figures, including, for instance, this very charming pot-bellied bald figure on the bottom right-hand of your screen, possibly an incense holder, and the beautiful head figure above it, and of course the piggy banks. John, what is the significance of the terracotta?
Well, my tastes have always been biased towards folk art. And just as in my early life, I never collected Chelsea Derby. And when it came to figures, I always collected Staffordshire. When it comes to Asian figures, I really like earthenware and terracottas. I like the folkiness of them, but I like the way that it's possible to show facial features and forms which are not always easy in high-fired porcelain or earthenwares. They're also used, say the line of 6 heads, I find fascinating. I believe they're from the Majapahit period, but look at the Chinese faces of the guy on the far left and the guy in the center. I guess this illustrates how the Chinese are pretty ubiquitous, and where there's money to be made, I think you'll find the Chinese. But terracottas is something that interests a lot of people. And next week or the week after, Anne Proctor is going to speak about the terracottas and the earthenwares, particularly from Sumatra. Anne has been interested in this area for a while, and I think there's a lot that we can learn. I know very little about them. I don't even know where a lot of these came from, but presumably they're Javanese. That funny little figure in the center is from Sulawesi. On his left are figures that are probably from Sumba, but all those islands made their own characteristic ceramics. And I think even now our attributions may well shown to be wrong when we learn much more about it. But it's something that is fascinating and by and large within the range of most people, if you like collecting as you travel.
Thanks, John. I'd like to move on to the textiles now. And earlier I mentioned the Balinese shrine hangings being particularly special. We were very fortunate to be able to hang them at full height in the gallery space here, alongside several of the temple banners from Thailand and Laos. And part of their charm is the signs of wear, and I think the fact that they've been used by the people who made them, as well as the incredible displays of individual creativity in each piece. John, I know seeing the banners used in Thailand was particularly evocative for you and led you to start collecting them. Could you talk a little bit about this, please?
Yes, I love temple hangings. I love banners. And as Siobhan does as well. And a lot of Lamak were chosen for the exhibition Encounters with Bali. I was fortunate to go through Thailand with a very good friend of mine who is Thai and is Thai speaking, so that as we moved around, he was able to talk to people, particularly monks. And we went to some pretty small towns. So we saw these banners, not only in temples, but also being carried in processions as people, I guess, wanted to share their devotion in the way that you'll see in Europe, particularly in the Roman Catholic faith. But they're different by and large to Bali in that the figures don't often show. I'm sorry, the banners don't often show figures, except in the ones from Eastern Thailand and Laos. And these are usually woven. But what I find fascinating about them is the figures themselves, because they have images of people and mythical animals, which are very similar to the ones you find on Tampan in, having a name block, Palembang and down in the south, Sumatra. And if you follow these figures, then you can actually trace the movement of the Srivijayan traders from South China through Laos, Cambodia, right down into Indonesia itself. And it's one of the fascinating things that you can get lost by pursuing some other aspect, particularly trade routes and traditions. But I think it's always wonderful to see objects that people have made to praise their own God, because so often they show and demonstrate a folk belief which is not always easily seen in other more sophisticated forms. But yeah, I agree, the hangings are wonderful. And I hope people will have the opportunity of coming to the gallery. And I understand we open next week and seeing them for themselves.
Thank you, John. I think, I could continue asking you more questions about various aspects of your collection and the exhibition. And I will say there's quite a captivating glow about you that really comes across when you talk about your pieces. I know members of the audience will have questions for you, and so we're very happy if the participants would like to use the chat function, and we can respond to your questions. So while we're waiting for any questions from the audience, John, I might just take you back to the very first, the Balinese hanging with the red background, which became the sort of theme for the Encounters exhibition, and for you to talk about that, because this piece is has such a range of textile techniques in it. We have a very fine sonket panel across the bottom, and then the sort of applique along the top.
What I find most fascinating in this piece is the applique figure, because it's the very naive nature of it that is appealing. What was interesting in Encounters with Bali in Indonesia is how interested the Indonesians were in these lamak and how little exposure they had had to them. I bought this piece from a dealer a general antique dealer in Bali. In fact, the guy that I think is the best antique dealer in the whole of Indonesia. But it was just amongst a pile of other textiles. And he was actually curious when I bought it, because he said, oh, the workmanship's not very fine. But what he couldn't see as a dealer is what a collector might find absolutely fascinating in the concepts of the creator.
Thanks, John. Now, we've got a few questions here, and there are some questions about the terracotta, but just while we're still looking at this banner, Marilyn Darling is asking whether these banners are still made or whether it's a lost technique.
Well, thank you, Marilyn. And might I say that a lot of Bali and some Thailand was seen with Marilyn and her late husband, Gordon, have been such generous supporters of Indonesia, Thailand, and art generally in Australia. Yes, Marilyn, when you go to Thailand, particularly in the north of Thailand, you still see them used very extensively. And there is a really large, now I've had a name block of what they call tung in the exhibition, where I actually met the guy who made it. I was going to say an older guy, but he was much younger than me. And he said to me, oh, I'm pleased you're taking that, because it's the last one I made. And it's the last one I will make, because, and he showed me his hands. He said, I've got arthritis and I can't do it now. But it is living art. And that's the great thing about so much of Southeast Asia. The traditional ancient art is still living.
John, we're now jumping to questions about the terracotta from Michelle Belgiorno. Hi. Firstly, what were the small terracotta figures used for? I assume that's the sort of 6 head figures on the top of the screen now.
I don't know, Anne Proctor might be able to tell me much more about it, but the other ones are, I suspect, are fertility figures. The ones of the 6 heads along the top of the screen, I suspect, were probably commissioned as portraits, but I don't really know. And with an audience such as the one we have tonight, I'm not into making things up just for the sake of giving an answer. You know, Siobhan? Or?
Yeah, well, all I could add to that is that they're very they're found in great numbers, and they're the figures always have the decapitated heads, which then leads people to speculate that somehow removing the heads was a part of ritual. But again, it's open to a great deal of speculation, but there's certainly like the range of different figures or character types found in sites around Terracotta or the center of the Majapahit kingdom is really captivating. Thanks, Michelle.
That's interesting, Siobhan, because a lot of the figures you find from Swankalok in Thailand, the heads are knocked off as part of the way of protecting them. And to the extent that if you find a figure with the head intact, then you really need to look carefully at it, because there are very, very few old figures with the head still intact. They're nearly always matched together, sometimes mismatched.
Now, John, I'm jumping through questions, and now we're going across to Borneo, and Liz has asked, Bernard Salato has edited a book, Plaited Arts from the Borneo Rainforest. I know you have that book in your library. And she says, I noticed that quite a few of the baskets are made in Borneo.
Yes, it's interesting that a lot of baskets, particularly some of the really sophisticated ones, come from people with a headhunting tradition. I don't know why, but as you pointed out, the big mats, basketry mats, are all Borneo. The very exquisite figures you see a pair of in this image are from Borneo. I guess when you have long periods of the year when it's raining very heavily and you have to stay in your longhouses, I know that's the time when a lot of cotton weaving takes place in the puas, but I suspect it might be the time when a lot of the very fine basketry takes place as well. But I don't know. That very heavy book, Siobhan, you might have looked at it better than I have.
Well, certainly the basketry and the matting traditions of Kalimantan and Borneo, the Malaysian part of the island, are sort of the most famous across the region. Perhaps you might include some of the Filipino baskets as being of similar expertise and range, but I mean, unquestionably, this is incredible basket making traditions. Michelle Belgiorno has asked as well of whether the skill of basketry, John, has been kept alive, or whether woven baskets have been replaced by plastic carrying bags.
Well, luckily, basketry is still alive. And I've certainly seen very recently baskets from Borneo or from Kalimantan, which are new, very new, often using old design, but the baskets themselves are clearly new and by and large not as carefully made or as detailed as the old baskets. I guess people don't have as much time today.
I'll also point out that, I mean, this basket on the screen now is a contemporary basket. This is not an old piece, is it, John?
No, it's about 10 years old.
Yeah, so that's, there are, but not all of the baskets and the objects or textiles exhibited are old or antiquities. We have got contemporary pieces, and we have some contemporary batik as well in the exhibition. John, another question. Can you tell us a little about the broken fired plates in the exhibition?
Sorry, I didn't catch that.
The broken fired plates or the kiln wasters that we've included in the exhibition? Yes.
They're kiln wasters. I think the ones in the exhibition are all from Sukhothai, but I always like having broken ceramics because it gives people a good idea of what the body looks like. But I think it's fun having a great pile of plates that have all been melted and fused to each other because kids really like it. And I hope younger people will come and look at the exhibition because I think it's the sort of things they can understand. I always buy broken things when I can find them. Firstly, they're cheaper than things that are intact, but secondly, they tell you a lot more.
And John, we're going back to another question I can see here. How are the old terracotta works dated to the 14th, 15th century? If you're wondering whether we've done dating on them, no, we haven't. But a lot of, one of the reasons that we can date them or is because of their having such close association with the Majapahit kingdom, which was, I suppose, the last Hindu-Buddhist empire of Java. A lot of these traditions moved across and are maintained on the island of Bali, but the Islamic art, which came to Java after Majapahit, is often quite different. So a lot of this dating is based on stylistic reasons, I suppose. But John, you might like to add something.
Yes, except that those 6 heads all came from the same dealer, Dayang Iskandar, in Bali. Dayang has been in the trade for, I guess, 40 or 50 years, and I've been dealing with him for about 30 years. But he's somebody I trust. And he had a big pile, and he said to me, those are old, these are not so old, those are new. And if I took something from the new, he'd always say to me, you sure you want that? And I think, like a lot of these things, experience and a developed eye and the tactile sense of handling it makes an enormous difference. And I almost would believe Dayang and his judgment more than I would with carbon dating or whatever other new technique people are using today.
Thank you. I can't see any more questions here. I think, I hope we've responded. I hope we've responded to everyone adequately. On behalf of John and myself, I would like to thank you for listening to our conversation. We've been very excited to come back into the gallery after a break and to talk about some of the choices we made in the exhibition. We're very much hoping that we'll be able to meet with some of you in person over the coming weeks.
Siobhan, could I just add?
Yes, sorry. Go ahead,
could I just
John.
add that I hope people will come and look at the exhibition soon, because whilst it's open, you never know what's going to happen next week or next month, whether we've got a new premiere or not. And all I mean is COVID's unpredictable. So let's do it while you can. Huh?
Thank you, John. And now I'll hand back over to Kelly from Mossman Art Gallery.
Great. At this point, please feel free to turn your cameras back on if you would like to. It's lovely for us to see our community. Okay. That was such a beautiful and insightful conversation. John, I loved your description of the banners as living art. So thank you, John and Siobhan, and for everyone for joining us this evening. And thank you, John, for your support of Mossman Art Gallery. It is thanks to donors such as John that we are able to deliver inspiring exhibitions and programming. Here at Mossman Art Gallery, we are excited to be developing a new exhibition program that celebrates our collection and brings the work of incredible artists to the people of Mossman and Sydney. I look forward to meeting you all in person in coming months. Under government guidelines, the gallery will be reopening on Monday, the 11th of October. So please do make the time to visit Upachara, ceremonial art from Southeast Asia, which will be on display until the 12th of December, hopefully. This will be followed in the new year by a major exhibition, Destination Sydney, The Natural World, which features works by Janet Lawrence, Caroline Rothwell and Robin Stacey. It celebrates Sydney as a site of art making and its incredible natural environment, and we can't wait to welcome you all. So thank you, John and Siobhan, and thank you all for joining us this evening, and we can't wait to see you all soon at Mossman Art Gallery.